Hello, I'm Mike, and today we're going to talk about joints. Joints are classified by the amount of movement allowed at each joint. There are synarthrosis, which are immovable joints. These are mainly along the axial skeleton, which is pretty much anything that touches midline. Then there are amphiarthrosis, which are slightly movable and also occur along the axial skeleton. And the third classification are diarthrosis, which are freely movable joints, and these are usually the limbs, so the arms and the legs. And the less movable a joint is, the more stable it is. That's why the shoulder, the rotator cuff, which has a lot of movement, is very unstable. And that's why people dislocate their shoulder very often. Certain movements allowed by synovial joints. Describing the movement, every skeletal muscle of the body is attached to bone or other connective tissue structures at no fewer than 2 points. The origin of the muscle is attached to the immovable bone, and at the other end, the insertion is attached to the movable bone. Body movement occurs when muscles contract across the joints and their insertion moves towards their origin. The range of motion allowed by synovial joints also varies from non-axial movement, which is slipping movements only, since there is no axis around which the movement can occur. An example of this would be the sliding here. And there are also 3 general types of movement. Gliding, which is shown here. There is also angular, which is shown here, and that decreases the angle of the bones. So when this moves down, the angle is being decreased. And there is rotation, which is shown here at the ball and socket joint. Specific types of joint movement are flexion, and flexion is a bending movement that decreases the angle of the joint and brings connected bones together. So here the leg being moved down is flexion. The opposite of that is extension, and it involves movement of bones that increase the angle between the bones, and usually it straightens a flexed limb or body part. The example here is moving this leg up. Then there's abduction, which is movement of a limb away from midline along the frontal plane. An example of this is moving the arm up. Adduction is the opposite of that. That is moving the limb closer to midline, and that's adduction. And there's the example of that, moving the arm down. Circumduction is moving a limb so in a cone-like fashion. So an example of that is rotating the arm like this, making a cone-like shape. Then there's specific movements that do not fit into these categories and are usually only apply to certain parts of the body. first example of this is supination and pronation. And supination, which means turning backwards, refers to the movement of the radius around the ulna. So rotating the forearm laterally so that the palm faces front or back is supination. And that is shown in a straight arm like this. When the arm's like this, the radius and the ulna do not cross and they're parallel. When the hand is pronated, the forearm rotates medially and the palm faces backwards, like this. And in this position, the radius and the ulna overlap to form an X. The next specific movement is dorsiflexion and plantar flexion of the foot, and that's the up and down movements of the foot at the ankle. So lifting the foot so that its top surface moves towards the shin is called dorsiflexion. That's moving it upward like that. And depressing the foot or pointing the toes like that is plantar flexion. Then the next movement is inversion and eversion. Inversion is when the sole of the foot turns towards midline, so like that, and eversion is the opposite of that, when the sole of the foot faces away from midline, so like that. Protraction and retraction then are the non-angular front and back movements in a single plane. And this is shown in the jaw like this. Protraction, the top one, is pushing the jaw forward, and retraction is pushing the jaw backwards. And when this is being done, it's in a single plane. The next special movement is elevation and depression. Elevation means lifting a body part superiorly. An example is lifting the shoulder upwards. That's elevation. And depression would be moving the shoulder downwards. The last special movement is opposition. This deals with the hand. And this is when the thumb touches the fingertips. And this only occurs in the thumb. It's called opposition. And it's just like that. And the 6 major classifications of joints based on these movements are plane, hinge, pivot, condyloid, saddle, and ball and socket joints. Each different joint allows different types of movements. But the movements that were covered are the main types of movements. And that's it for joints.